a number of issues, including his border wall, the Defense Secretary James Mattis, who resigned last week, and also saying that he was all alone at the White House. So that was just minutes before Melania Trump returned from Florida, where she had been just before the government shut down. So here, President Trump is spending a relatively quiet Christmas morning at the White House, but there is, as of yet, no progress on this government shutdown. Tomorrow might be the first day where we will see any sort of movement on that front. Manu.
Abby Phillip live at the White House. Abby, thank you. The Dow and the S&P 500 suffered their biggest Christmas Eve declines in history yesterday. Stocks initially fell after Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin spoke with bank CEOs. They told him they had enough liquidity to keep lending. But that spooked investors because liquidity was not considered a problem in the first place. Markets recovered later that morning, but slid again after President Trump tweeted, "The only problem our economy has is the Fed." I'm Manu Raju. Merry Christmas. More headlines in half an hour.
It can be hard to keep hope and faith during turbulent times. So how can a person find light in the midst of tragedy, trauma, or adversity? Let's discuss faith today with Rabbi Jeffrey Myers of the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, where, of course, this year many worshipers lost their lives in a massacre. We also have with us Pastor Eric Manning. He's the senior pastor of Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church of Charleston, or Mother Emanuel, where in 2015 the same thing happened.
Also with us, Pastor Josh Gallagher, the lead pastor of the Paradise Alliance Church, which survived the Camp Fire in California. Father Michael Nixon, the pastor of St. Dominic Catholic Church in Panama City, Florida. It was severely damaged during Hurricane Michael. And David Gregory, our friend, the author of How's Your Faith, which describes his journey of faith. Thank you all for being here. You know, it's a tiny subject, faith, in the country right now. And David, because you're the one who went to seminary for the longest.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but look, what do you think the most important questions are about faith in our society right now?
Well, I think people are wrestling with faith. Not so much wrestling with an inner yearning that they have for a greater sense of meaning and purpose in their lives, but I think a lot of people lack the vocabulary to attach to that sense of meaning and that desire for meaning. So if God is at work in every one of us, it's a question of how do you access God? How do you access that grace? Organized religion has a lot of difficulties that get in the way of being able to communicate that message. But when I look at this group here, often in times of great joy and also great grief or personal hardship, we are drawn to community. We're drawn to grace. We're drawn to love because we want to try to elevate ourselves in those moments. And so I think the trick is to capture the elements of faith that sustain us in really hard times and remind ourselves, no, we actually need that in every day, out of a sense of gratitude, a reminder of love, a reminder of wonder, a reminder of civility. And let's not silo faith for those moments of hardship and grief.
I'm so glad you said that, David, because I remember while the massacre at Tree of Life, while we were reporting on it, and we met you, Rabbi, David Gregory said, wouldn't it be wonderful to have voices of, church leaders or synagogue leaders, just men of faith, people of faith, on all the time in our national dialogue? Wouldn't those voices be valuable? And so your voice was so valuable during that time. I mean, so many people got strength from you who was grieving, who had to hide in a room during that massacre. And so I'm wondering, 2 months later, how are you doing?
Your faith gets challenged, but I think it's because I have a deep abiding faith that gives me the strength to persevere, to move on, not even day by day. Still, I think it's hour by hour, because for me, since October 27th, it's been just one long day. It's really hard to keep track of what day today is or which week it is, but my faith helps propel me, and I try to find ways to share that with my community to help give them some strength to move onward and say that we're not alone in this immense challenge. It's a journey, and we're going to get through this together. I'm your tour guide.
Pastor Manning, when you see what Rabbi Myers is going through, Do you see an image of yourself from 3 years ago? Can you say, I was there, I went through this, or is every experience different and unique?
Well, from a point of clarity perspective, I came to Mother Emanuel a year after. So what Rabbi Myers, of course, experienced, I cannot necessarily completely understand. But within Rabbi Myers, I do see that hope, that strength, as he leads the Tree of Life Synagogue and all the family members through this time. And as he draws strength from his faith and hope from his faith, it continues to encourage so many others. I share with Rabbi that the Monday after I returned, that I had a moment of which I was overwhelmed again. And that sense of being overwhelmed reminded me still how far removed at times I find myself, and then needing to cling to that same faith, that same hope, to allow me to know that, yes, I can persevere. Yes, I can make it. Yes, there is still much more work that needs to be done, and there's still much more encouragement that needs to be done. And we have to continue to walk by that faith and not by sight.
But you're so right. I mean, grief can be a roller coaster ride. You know, you're never fully over it. It comes and goes. There are highs and lows, and I think that it's important for people out there to know that with whatever they're struggling with. And so, Father Josh, you perhaps have had the most recent trauma in Paradise, and I don't like that it's trauma that binds all of us here together, but you all are just great voices to talk to for people who may be struggling out there. So since yours is so recent with the wildfires, how are you coping?
I've been amazed at how God enters into our grief with us. Many times we maybe go through things like, I can't question God, and if I question God, he's not going to like me. I've noticed in the middle of this grief and talking with many people in my congregation and my community of letting them know it's okay to be angry with God. You can still love him. It's okay to question him and still have faith at the exact same time. It's okay to be mad at God and tell him what you think, and he's still going to love you. Letting people know that message brings a lot of hope and encouragement because, wow, God can really relate with the situation that I'm in, the real emotions that I have, and what I'm feeling. I simply tell our people, if you want a real relationship with God, you need to be real with God. And that has given people a lot of hope and encouragement. And instead of destroying their faith, I think it's actually defined their faith.
And of course, your own personal experience, you could look at it one of two ways, either glass half empty or glass half full. You got to Paradise. You moved to Paradise 3 months before the fires, and you could look at that and say, oh my goodness, I'm moving there just before the whole thing burns up. But the flip side of that is you got there just in the nick of time to do your job.
I couldn't think of any time anywhere else I would rather be serving than right now in Paradise, California, in the midst of all of this. A lot of people were worried because they're like, you just moved here. How can you do this? I thought, no, this is why I moved here. God has brought me to this community, to this church, to these group of people for such a time as this. And it's not easy. It is difficult. But when there's a sense of calling and a greater purpose behind what's going on, those are the things that get you out of bed in the morning and say, okay, let's see what the challenges are today and tackle those one at a time.
Rabbi Myers, you had a similar experience. People think that you were at the Tree of Life forever because your congregation loves you so much and you're already so close-knit. But you had only been there a year when this violence happened.
And as you were speaking, I felt the exact same way, that God sent me to Pittsburgh and to do some holy work, and that's why I'm there. And I couldn't see myself being anywhere else but in Pittsburgh.
Father Michael, you had your roof blown off during Hurricane Michael in Panama City, and I have to believe that was a moment where prayer came in useful.
Absolutely.
But then I also have to believe that while that's going on, you know that the minute the rain stops pouring and the wind stops blowing, that's when your real work begins.
That was actually, I would say, one of the graces that we were able to stay, myself and my associate pastor, our seminarian, and my dog. We all stayed in the house there at the parish, so weathered through the storm, but we knew that there was going to be a need immediately following. And so actually one of the graces is just the utter devastation as you walk out, and it continues even now. There's just utter devastation in the very slow process of rebuilding. But we knew that we'd be able to help. And so working with Catholic Charities, the day after the storm, they got a truck full of water delivered to us, and we started unloading that, and people just kept coming, and that grew to we didn't have buildings, we just had a parking lot, serving thousands of people a day. Our own parishioners, people that had lost their homes that were coming to help, and then people coming, volunteers from all over the country, and people coming from Canada, and just hearing about it on social media. So being able to serve tens of thousands of people, not being able to fix all their problems, but being able to be there with them, to me was living the mission that God has for us in a really palpable, beautiful way.
Yeah, let's take a quick break. We have clearly much more to discuss. We're just scratching the surface. This special Christmas edition of New Day continues right after this.
And we're back with Rabbi Jeffrey Myers, the rabbi of the Tree of Life Synagogue of Pittsburgh. We also have Pastor Eric Manning with us, the senior pastor of Mother Emanuel Church in Charleston, Pastor Josh Gallagher, the lead pastor in Paradise, California at the Alliance Church, and Father Michael Nixon, the pastor of St. Dominic Catholic Church in Panama City, Florida, as well as David Gregory. And so, David, we were just, he's the author of How's Your Faith? I almost forgot to mention that. And I think that's really important, David, because as we were saying, you know, when tragedy happens, we talk about faith and we talk about how to get through tragedy, but we don't talk about it every day. And faith leaders' voices are not part of our national dialogue often. Are we not comfortable with it?
Well, I think there's a lot of secularism in the media generally. I also think that while there are deep people of faith within the media, there are many more who actually lack the vocabulary of belief. These gentlemen and their colleagues, they have it. Their parishioners, their congregations want it. They seek community. They build around it. So I think we have a job to do to kind of demystify it, to understand that there are institutions of religion that are under stress and for whom, who have lost the trust of a lot of people. But that doesn't mean that people don't have a yearning. Part of the yearning is not only a relationship with God that's going on inside of them, but it's also a kind of return to the best of themselves, which these gentlemen can remind us of. It shouldn't be a revelation in the context of talking about news and current events. It should be a central part of the conversation.
Well, to that end, and let me put this to you, Pastor Manning, how do you determine the line between the religious discourse, how you speak to your flock, and the public discourse, if you're going to choose to speak to the community at large or the nation? Because, you know, we all know that in each one of your cases, I could sit there and say there's a public policy discussion to be had. There's a political discussion to be had about each one of the tragedies, whether man-made or natural, that have happened in each of your congregations.
Yeah, so I think, John, from that particular perspective, you have to first and foremost pray about the proper response for anything and everything. Even when I look back over the week leading up to the Tree of Life massacre, and I thought about that sermon that week. That sermon was given a week prior, the topic, the words. And then from that particular perspective, sharing with the congregation that your words matter, then of course it took on a larger footprint. And I think when we trust God enough, God will give us those words that will speak not only to our present congregation, the congregation that we're serving, but also to the greater and larger community. And it does exactly what God has intended it to do. It challenges our thinking. It calls us to do the right thing. May not be the popular thing, but it causes us to do the right thing. And then to draw that commonality, as David has said, which binds us close together. That there is a yearning, that there is a desire to say, you know what, we are all in this together. This being life, this being the experience of life, this being the struggles of life, this being rebuilding, this being having a hope that continues to resonate, not just within our own silos, but also with everyone else. And even during the Christmas season, right? We all then tap into that hope. Mm-hmm. You know, people are more courteous. They will open their door for somebody. They will hold the door. They would give up their parking space. They will let them come in line first. But the challenge then is we must be able to do that on a daily basis, just because there is much more that unites us than divides us.
Let's talk about people out there who may be struggling. The holidays are hard for people. It brings up sometimes past trauma or pain. Rabbi Myers, you're still grieving. You're still traumatized from what happened 2 months ago. So what words can you say to people who today are struggling?
You're not alone. I think, is the most critical thing. People feel that they're the only one going through a particular hardship in their lives, and they're not alone. There are many others, and there are many people there who want to help. The challenge is, how do you bring the people who need the help together with the helpers so that we can make this work? For me, as a religious leader, I try to keep my eyes on my congregants, but I don't regularly see each of them every day, so I can't know what they're going through on any given day and who really needs my attention. I can only focus on the ones I see, and there are only so many phone calls you can make in the course of any given day to touch base with other people.
But I think that's an important message. People need to reach out. People who are struggling also need to reach out. I know that that's hard, but there are people, you're saying, who would help them.
Yes, but I found, regrettably, a lot of the people who need help in many spheres sometimes feel paralyzed with that and don't know where to go, what to do. It's kind of like saying there are plenty of food pantries, but the people who need the food don't have the wherewithal to get to the food pantry, so the pantry's got to get the food to those people. But how do we identify them? Just as a simple example.
You know, I feel like one of the great faith lessons doesn't have to do with God. It's you know, when you can ask somebody, how are you? And everybody's, oh, I'm great, I'm doing this. But then stop and say, how are you? It's a penetrating question. It's kind of like in the Bible, you know, in the Hebrew Bible, when Abraham is called and he says, Hineni, I'm here. But it's not like I'm here, I'm raising my hand like I'm in class. It's like, no, I'm here fully present for you. And that's what we need a little bit more of, is to remind, whether you've gone through grief, everybody's had some hardship, to pick up, to reach out to somebody and say, you know, I'm here. I'm just here. That's all you need to know. That's what's so comforting, I think.
Father Michael?
I really love the aspect of talk about the religion, the faith tradition that is represented here. I was talking with the rabbi beforehand about a psalm that has moved his heart. And I love the fact that our common prayer coming together ensures, in a sense, or at least opens up the door for us to realize that we're not alone, to realize that not only we're not alone because we're with this community, this congregation that's gathering around us, that's also hurting and encouraging us, but that we're not alone through the ages too. That you know, thousands of years people have been praying these psalms and have been struggling with these questions of faith and where is God in the midst of that, and encountering God too, and that God enters into our mess. He enters into our brokenness. That's at the very heart of Christmas, that we're this Christmas season that we're entering into, is that God enters into the mess with us. And I find so much strength and hope there, but it's never a solitary reality. It's always part of this big, messy family of God.
And don't you guys feel that, in part, the promise of faith is the promise of community? You know, I mean, the message of God and of faith is also an antidote to media addiction, to the silos in social media. It's a reminder that there's a different kind of community. I mean, that's what you represented on our air, was the idea that you were representing community, but then you became part of a wider community because people did want to come forward and say, we are here. We're here for you. We're here for anybody who's the victim of that kind of violence. And then we're here to then also learn about how to forgive, how to be moved, instead of being united in opposition to something, which is a lot of what public discourse is about.
Father Josh, what gives you solace?
Unfortunately, during tragedy, it takes a tragedy to see the best in people. Many times we have faith community over here and then our other community over here. And what I've noticed that's encouraged me is seeing the communities come together as we are one community. And we maybe don't believe the exact same things, but we both have the same goal of we want to see this community move forward. And seeing the love for that people have for each other, where we're not labeled anymore, well, you went to this church in Paradise, or you're a part of this community in this part of Paradise, but truly the community coming together. Having enough respect for each other to say, I don't fully maybe understand everything that you believe, but I can still love you and care for you. And I will respect your beliefs. At the same time, I'm going to let you respect mine. And it's been the best definition of faith and community actually coming together. It's unfortunate, though, that it takes these kind of devastations, tragedies, that bring us together. So anyone that's maybe struggling out there, maybe you don't have a specific faith community that you can relate with, but if you could reach out to any faith community, I would hope you would find somebody that would be a shoulder you could cry on, someone just to listen to your story and encourage you during the season, because we are one community.
Gentlemen, I don't think we can thank you enough for coming in. I think this is such an important discussion for any faith or for those maybe who, aren't part of a faith community, just to talk about the community that David brought up there. Wonderful to have you here. Happy holidays to all of you. Merry Christmas.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, President Trump finishing his second year in office. So what accomplishments, what controversies will
A federal judge orders North Korea to pay the parents of Otto Warmbier more than $500 million. Fred and Cindy Warmbier filed a wrongful death suit against the regime, which detained Otto in 2016. He died last year, days after he was returned to the U.S., and he was allegedly tortured. North Korea did not respond to the suit, yet any damages awarded would likely come from North Korea's frozen assets in the United States. Actor Kevin Spacey facing indecent assault and battery charges for allegedly assaulting an 18-year-old man in July 2016. The announcement coinciding with the bizarre video Spacey posted in his defense titled "Let Me Be Frank," a play on his former House of Cards character, Frank Underwood.
You wouldn't believe the worst without evidence, would you? You wouldn't rush to judgments without facts, would you? Did you? If I didn't pay the price for the things we both know I did do, I'm certainly not going to pay the price for the things I didn't do.
No comment yet from Spacey's attorney. A special Christmas for nearly 300 convicted felons in California. Governor Jerry Brown issuing 143 pardons and 131 commutations. Brown also ordered new DNA tests in a high-profile 1983 quadruple murder. Inmate Kevin Cooper and supporters maintain he was framed. Governor Brown did not grant a pardon to the brother of San Francisco Mayor London Breed. The mayor asked the governor to commute Napoleon Breed's 44-year sentence for involuntary manslaughter. I'm Manu Raju. Have a very Merry Christmas.
From the many indictments in the ongoing special counsel investigation to the high-stakes summits with North Korea and Russia and the contentious confirmation battle of Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, it's been quite a year. It's been quite a consequential second year in office for President Trump.
That's one way to say it.
Yes. So let's discuss all of this with CNN political analyst David Gregory, CNN senior political analyst John Avlon, and CNN senior political reporter Nia Malika Henderson. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you very much for being here. So is there any way to sum up the year, David Gregory, of what it's been like?
You know, I just think that the headspace for President Trump is so clouded by the Mueller investigation and any perceived slight to him. I mean, he walks around with a sense of being aggrieved and under siege, and he's so reactive. He's reactive to all of that his, as a gut player, that temperament and that gut feeling of always searching for a fight is foremost on his minds. And it really is what has clouded everything else, including areas where he's shown some promise. That's the piece that I think really hangs over the second year, is the desire to fight and the inability to restrain himself or to have anyone restrain him from that instinct.
I think that's exactly right. And I think if you took the Mueller investigation as an overlay to everything else that happens, it would be sort of instructive, right? You would have a sense of what his mood was approaching each and every one of those things. And on the one hand, I understand the frustration. I mean, the president feels that too much attention is being paid to it. But on the other hand, he's letting it get to him. He's letting it dictate all the other things that he should be doing.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, if you were to look at his Twitter feed over this last year, it would be dominated in many ways by talking about the Russia probe, about Mueller, about this idea that it's a witch hunt, this idea that he doesn't see any collusion. So, yeah, I mean, he can't find a way out of it. I mean, if you compare what happened with Bill Clinton, for instance, Bill Clinton was sort of a happy warrior while the Starr investigation and impeachment hearings were going on, kept saying, I'm going to focus on the people's business. But you have with Donald Trump doing something very different, focusing very much on Mueller, trying to damage his reputation. And then you have, obviously, the Republicans having to get pulled into this in many ways, respond to the way he's responding to Bob Mueller. So it's been a bit of a mess, I think, for this past year.
It's also interesting that there is I've talked to a Democratic strategist recently who said, you know, the thing about President Trump, he overwhelms the system. He certainly overwhelms the media with how much he says, on how many subjects he says it. So Mueller alone, if you think about Twitter, if you did a word cloud for Donald Trump, there would be so many words on so many subjects, so outside the lines. It's literally hard not to feel overwhelmed. The system itself feeling overwhelmed. And I think that says a lot about
Not to mention spell check overwhelmed.
Right. Dictionaries are overwhelmed. Yes.
We're making up new words every day. But I think the dominant emotions of the president's output on Twitter and elsewhere do tend back to these tools of what he sees as tools of fear and anger. And it's Christmas. And so President Scrooge doesn't exactly fit the day. But you'd hope that he would find a little bit more redemptive in the powers of the presidency and less about simply venting his spleen and the power of resentment, because he'll point to the good economy and he'll say he's not getting adequate credit. I think you could find silver linings in his presidency, even if you disagree with the president. And I think, that's perhaps an exercise that's worthwhile on a Christmas morning. But the fact is this president has consistently focused on the negative emotions of the presidency, and history shows that does not end well for anyone.
I think any exercise is valuable on a Christmas morning because you need to stretch out. You need to get the body moving. I think, first of all, it's hard to believe that the two summits, Helsinki and Singapore, with Kim Jong-un, happened this year, right? I mean, it feels like 100 years ago that they happened, but I feel like they're so instructive when figuring out this presidency. Take just Singapore with North Korea, because this is something that I think only Donald Trump could have done as president. I don't think any other no other president has, and I don't think any other president
And he wanted to break convention, and he wanted to shake it up, and he wanted to do things that other people couldn't achieve. And so becoming friendly or pen pals with Kim Jong-un, having a good relationship, as he often said he wanted with Vladimir Putin, he attempted to do both of those this year.
Is it worth it? With North Korea, as we sit here at the end of the year, is it worth it?
It might be. I mean, what was happening before wasn't working, but part of that period of time of decades of not working, North Korea achieved what it wanted, which was a nuclear deterrent. It was able to mature its nuclear program to the point that it was satisfied. Now, provocations of the West and Trump saying we're not going to put up with that anymore, and then the symmetry and the I love you notes and all the rest, and pressure on China to try to wield some influence. I don't know that any of it's done any lasting good except for lower the temperature for now.
Yeah, I think the flow through, I mean, what you're describing isn't a doctrine. It's an elevation of self. But because it is the Christmas season, he certainly is effusive about feelings of love for Kim Jong-un and dictators around the world. And perhaps there's the flow through. He does have an affinity for dictators. And perhaps a belief he can break through some stalemates with some version of realpolitik, sort of, sugared with his personal charm. But the actions don't actually change. Right? This is the problem, as we know through CNN's own reporting, that missile silos are being built just inland, that the underlying threat hasn't changed, but the temperature. What's strange is seeing the leader of the free world, the President of the United States, expressing love for the North Korean dictator, creating cover for the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia in the face of the murder of a journalist and American resident, and refusing to, of course, ever say anything bad about Vladimir Putin. That's the closest we come to a Trump.
On Helsinki, in like 15 seconds or less, because we'll move on to different subjects. With the benefit of hindsight now, 5 months, the Helsinki summit where he stood side by side with Vladimir Putin.
Doesn't look any better.
Yeah.
No.
The president has been willfully ignorant of who Putin is and the threat that Russia poses. That is clear based on what we know so far from the Mueller investigation about all of the contacts with Russia. No one ever saying this could go down a really bad road. They think of them as just kind of another actor with whom you can negotiate, not seeing it for what it is.
Okay, so a victory for President Trump this year. Supreme Court justice is seated. And after all of the drama of the Brett Kavanaugh confirmation hearings, the president won.
Oh, he won. And conservatives and Republicans won. I mean, this has been a dream of Republicans for decades, to have that controlling vote on the Supreme Court. And that's what they have at this point. So we'll look for any number of decisions down the pipe about abortion, about affirmative action, about voting rights, about the death penalty, all of these things. You've got Republicans excited about what this new court will bring them. And, their strategizing paid off. I mean, the real victor, too, obviously Trump, but Mitch McConnell as well.
David, Nia, John, thank you very much. Merry Christmas to each and every one of you.
Thank you all. Well, the Democrats managed to capture the House in the midterm elections, but what will the fallout for both parties be at the end of this year? We look ahead.